Hey, besties. Happy Sunday. How y'all doing? Hello, everybody. I see y'all in the chat. Oh, I forgot to put this up. Um, I see y'all in the chat. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Sunday. Happy Scorpio season. Happy retrogrades left and right. Child, so much going on. We are definitely in a season of transition. It's your boy, Mixed Mercury, the Astro Himbo. I am sober today. So, my plan for today's reading, today's session is to just give a quick little insight into now that the sun is in Scorpio. Of course, my Instagram feed changes, and so I got a little bit of insights from that. But sun is in Scorpio, so the tone just shifted a little bit into okay, let me back up. How I want to do today's transit chat is to talk a little bit about the astro of the moment, of course, and then pull some cards for the new moon. I think pulling cards for the new moon is great practice because when you're in a new moon, it's dark. Child can't see nothing, don't know what's going on, don't know what's coming, just kind of wandering around in the unknown and in the uncertainty. So I always feel like that's a better time to pull cards. And then usually by the full moon and the following last quarter moon, I be on one because all the revelations have happened. So yeah, a little bit of transit chat, a little bit of card pulls. And then if y'all have any questions, whether it's related to Scorpio stuff or related to the conversation or just general astro questions, I'm happy to also answer those along the way. So please feel free to drop those in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Please like the video. Leave a comment if you are watching this sometime in the future. Thank you for watching this and giving me some views, some playback. And yeah, let's get into it. So first, hello to everyone in the chat. Hello to Deb. Hello to Lo. Hello to Desiree. Child, wrap this year up. Listen. We still have so much astro left. It actually stresses me out. So let's just get through November. Okay. Let's just get through November. We'll worry about December when December gets here. We've got a couple more weeks left before then. Okay. Astro of the week. We dealing with, hello heart. Astro of the week. We are dealing with the sun in Scorpio, which already happened earlier today. Tomorrow we have the sun trine Jupiter, who is moving in reverse. Jupiter is. Sun trine Jupiter in Cancer, and then we have the sun trine Saturn in Pisces. That's for Monday the 17th. And then Thursday, November 20th, the new moon is in Scorpio at 3 degrees, so early degrees of fixed signs. We'll feel this one. And then we also get the sun conjunct Mercury retrograde. So if you've been following Mercury retrogrades for quite some time, you know that the sun conjunct Mercury retrograde, or they call it the Mercury Kazemi, where Mercury moves back basically into the sun, that tends to bring about some clarity moments dealing with the Mercury retrograde of it all, and hopefully some solutions moving forward about how to deal with the rest of the retrograde phase and the post-shadow phase. So we get some of that on Thursday. Then Saturday, November 22nd, we have Mercury retrograde trine Saturn retrograde, and then we also have Mercury trine Jupiter. So I thought that was interesting when I was looking at it. We start the week with the sun trine Jupiter and Saturn, which I think gives us some insight, gives us some awareness, and some I don't know, a level of focus on what both the Jupiter and Saturn retrogrades have been doing. Well, yeah, maybe. They give us really what the sun is doing. It's giving us some insight into all the Scorpio stuff, right? Because we've only had Mars and Mercury moving through Scorpio so far. So the sun comes through to kind of shed some light on the subject. And then I think that trine, because we're getting more insight into what's going on in the Scorpio house, in the Scorpio themes of your life, then that kind of gives you some insight into how to work with then the energy that's coming from both Jupiter and Saturn retrogrades, and gives us some insight into how our Scorpio stuff can facilitate or sometimes enable what's going on in our Cancer house with Jupiter and in our Pisces house with Saturn. So I think it's interesting that the week starts with the sun and then the week ends with Mercury renegotiating its previous trines that it made with Jupiter and Saturn in Cancer and Pisces, respectively. So that should be interesting. And then come next Sunday, which I'm sure we will probably talk about this, Mercury will retrograde back into Libra. So we deal with that cardinalship once again. So when we are talking about Scorpio and now fully being in Sun and Scorpio season, Scorpio is a fixed water sign. So we are dealing with that whole conversation around the body and being affected by things. And we are also dealing with fixed signs, which deal with identity and themes around self-acceptance and self-abandonment and the ways that we cope with self-acceptance or rejection or alienation. When we're talking about Scorpio specifically, Scorpio deals with themes around emotional autonomy, I like to say. We're dealing with emotional authenticity, which I think is even more specific to Scorpio, planets moving through Scorpio. We are also dealing with emotional differences with people and just physical sometimes differences with people as well. And we are dealing with alienation. We're dealing with what's it called? What is that term? Self-isolation and self-abandonment. And just a lot of self-protection too. My Lord of the Year is Jupiter in Scorpio. And so meaning I have my natal Jupiter in Scorpio right alongside Venus in Scorpio. And being in this Jupiter ruled year, I've noticed how much of my thoughts and how much of my disposition towards the world is constantly asking the question, is this safe? Am I safe? And I think Scorpio placements, Scorpio people also tend to ask the same question in whatever flavor, planet, or house that they deal with Scorpio things, and whatever house you deal with Scorpio things. This constant question of, am I safe? And I would even go so far as to say, is it safe to be me? Constantly surveilling your relationships and the environment to say, like, am I safe? Is it safe to be me? Like, is this safe? Is everything okay? It's just like an ongoing thing. Is it safe to express myself emotionally? Is it safe to wear my feelings and my heart on my sleeve? Just, is it safe? But I think, is it safe to be me? Feels like a really relevant question, especially for the sun moving through Scorpio with Mercury and Mars. So there's that. I know a couple weeks ago, I talked about just this whole grand water trine that we're dealing with between Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. And there was this conversation around Scorpio as the 8th house and Scorpio as this like death and transformation theme. And shadow work as well. So I saw a post this morning that I did post on my business Instagram that the first slide on it says, you can't heal if you're still afraid to be ugly. The monster is not your enemy. The monster is your messenger. And that was very loud Scorpio to me. I was like, oh, hey, talking about shadow work yet again, but also talking about this whole idea of Scorpio representing the taboo and the unseen and the socially unacceptable anti-status quo thing that I think Scorpio has going on. But the post goes on to say that monster comes from Latin and it's connected with two verbs, monere, I think, which is to warn, and then monster, which is to show. So what we call monstrous is simply the part of you that shows what you're still hiding, the messenger that issues the warning cry. It says we're taught to exile what's too much, not enough, too raw, too loud, too tender. And it says that we forget that what we label as flaw is often unfinished art. So we curate, we polish, we perform healing. But the parts we lock in the basement don't die. They organize your life from the dark, the unfinished art, the love you sabotage, the migraine that warns you every time you betray a boundary. A play of shame, shadow, and integration begins. Because in both Tantra and psychology, what you call shadow is not evil, it is energy without awareness. Shame marks the doorway. Remember, shame is one of our fixed sign words as well. Shame marks the doorway. Shadow guards the treasure. Integration is spiritual metabolism, turning what once poisoned you into power. So if you want rebirth, stop airbrushing your resurrection. Rebirth is not an aesthetic glow. Rebirth is a sacred demolition. It is the mud that precedes the lotus. Think of the old story, the man who couldn't accept that he was both Jekyll and Hyde. He didn't become dangerous because he had a shadow. He became dangerous because he refused to acknowledge it. Denial is the real horror. What you refuse to feel, you're forced to repeat. What you notice with awareness, you begin to rewire. So meet your monster, let it show you. The jealousy that says, I'm starving for my own desire. The rage that says, my boundary has been unpaid for years. The people pleasing that says, I traded truth for belonging. The numbness that says, I'm terrified to want. When you stop shaming these signals, they stop needing to scream. The ugly becomes useful, the cringe becomes the compass, and the monster becomes the monk guiding you through the dark. And you look at the monsters you've been trying to smother and hide, and know that you are not alone. If you want personalized support on the journey, then they are promoting their own stuff. So that's from CB Meditates. I posted it on my story. I thought all of that spoke very strongly to Scorpio, and it also spoke to the difference between Mars and Venus, and even a little bit to the differences between Taurus and Scorpio, and also Libra and Scorpio. That line that talked about kind of polishing the exterior or the veneer in order to hide kind of the shadows, and this idea of people pleasing in service of belonging, and how sometimes you're sacrificing truth for belonging. All those different things just felt very relevant to what Scorpio seeks to do. And I think what Scorpio seeks to do is kill the inauthentic parts of you and allow your shadow to integrate. And when people talk about your shadow integrating, again, we talked about this on a previous live, but it's just this idea that all of those dark and scary and unsavory parts of you really exist to protect you. They exist to serve you and to be in service of your authentic sense of self and your uniqueness and what makes you you. And whenever we try to cast the shadow out, or we try to alienate ourselves from our own shadow, then we start to compartmentalize around the shadow. Our lives become focused on not letting this part of ourselves out instead of giving it a job to do, basically. So I often feel like a lot of shadow work is identifying your shadow, reconciling with it, and then giving it a job so that it knows when it's allowed to come forward. And we're not constantly in this space of, I can't let anybody see this, because if anybody sees this, I will be abandoned. I will be rejected. I will be alienated. Well, sometimes certain people don't need to be around you. Sometimes people need to get from around you. And your shadow is the thing that will get them people up out of here. So give it a job. That's usually the lesson of the Scorpio stuff. The Scorpio stuff is, I feel how I feel when I feel that way. And it just be like that sometimes. Sometimes that's going to scare other people away. Well, maybe they didn't need to stick around in the first place. The flip side of that I was thinking about yesterday, that I think all Scorpios, myself included, need to hear, is that this is a two-way street. So just as much as you are allowed to say that you don't like, don't want, don't feel something, other people are also allowed to feel that way about you. People are allowed to reject you. People are allowed to abandon you. People are allowed to leave if they feel like you are just not what they want. But you are also supposed to remember that you are allowed to leave. You are allowed to reject. You are allowed to remove yourself from things that don't serve you, that don't work for you, that don't feel right to you. And it's not a matter of positioning ourselves above or below other people. It's not really even about like the character and the quality of other people at the end of the day. It's about, does this feel like a place where I can be authentic? Again, is it safe to be me, being the primary question? And if the answer is no, It's to remember that you have options. The option may not necessarily be that you need to cut and run, because sometimes you can't do that, right? Sometimes you don't like your boss. Sometimes you don't like your coworkers, but you need to make money. So what do? This is where sometimes the Venus of it all comes in. Sometimes you're allowed to mask if that's what you need to do, to code switch, um, to pretend like you're a little bit more okay with things than you really are. But it's different when that's coming from a place that's a conscious choice to do that because you know that you need to survive, versus doing it unconsciously because, again, you're trying to circumvent some kind of truth about a situation. Like, and also sometimes the other answer is boundaries. Maybe I don't put forward as much effort as I normally would if this were a place where I felt safe and received and accepted and somewhere that I could be authentic. You're not going to be able to be authentic all the time. You just aren't. It's not safe. It's not wise to do that. You're going to need some discernment that allows you to say, okay, this is a place where I can be myself. This is a place or a person where I can't be myself. What do I need to do in order to not self abandon? Because self abandoning sometimes looks like doing something or being someone you don't want to be because someone else is demanding that from you, again, versus it being your active choice and decision to do so. It's not always going to be conscious, and that's okay. Nobody's asking for perfection, but I'm just trying to highlight again that if you know, right, that there is a part of you that can be a little mean sometimes, and you're in a situation where someone's disrespecting you, I think it's okay for you to be mean. I think it's okay for you to be mean and for that other person to reject you because of that. Right? Like, you probably didn't want to be close to them in the first place. There may be a part of you that is overly sensitive. Well, if you are dealing with someone who has zero tact and zero interest in being tactful and zero interest in caring about how you feel, your sensitivity is letting you know, hey, this person is probably not for me. Um, if somebody is abusing you, if somebody is mistreating you, if somebody is hurting you physically and you need to fight back, your anger is valid, right? It's stuff like that where, when we're young, we're conditioned either intentionally or unintentionally, or we decide for ourselves that in order for me to survive this environment and these relationships, I need to show up like this. And that's all cool and good for those relationships. And especially in that context, that's what you knew to do. That's what you did. That becomes a part of you. And then as an adult, when you have a little bit more autonomy, Mars word, in your relationships, you are then allowed to decide if those strategies are something that you want to employ in the situation, or if it's just a situation you need to get the fuck up out of, right? Because one thing Mars is going to do is get you to hell up out of somewhere or get some people the fuck away from you. And we need to let Mars do its job sometimes. So those are my thoughts about Scorpio, the sun in Scorpio, this Mercury retrograde stuff. And my warning to people, my soft warning to people when the sun moves through Scorpio, Mercury, Mars, whoever it is just to say that that ugliness, just like that post was saying, might come up sometimes and people might have to witness it. But your job is to figure out if, how, when, and where that ugliness actually serves you, and to not shame it away and to not exile it away from yourself, because it is a part of you. It just needs a job. Give it a job. I don't know if I have anything else to add to that right now, but those are my opening statements. I want to get into these cards. Feel free to drop any of your comments or ideas or reactions to that statement and let me know what you think. So, ciao. Welcome in, Runes. I'm glad to hear that immediately started speaking to you. So, all right, let's get to shuffling. I will be taking this into my first house perfection of Scorpio Sun and Libra Moon. Okay, period. What's your first house? Oops. Scorpio. Okay, period. Wow, Scorpio Sun in the first. Enjoy. Where's your Mars? because your Mars is going to be calling all the shots this year. So Mars years can be exhausting, to say the least. So, oh, and Libra, I see. Okay, so your 12th house is giving you insight into this first house perfection too. Well, best of luck with that. And if you'd like to talk about it, I mean, my books are a little full until sometime in January, but you know, I'm around. If you want a little mini personal year ahead, we could chat about it. Okay. Elevated and healed ancestors and spirits. I'm already getting warm. Child of channeling is about to begin. To my elevated and healed ancestors and spirits, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing all these people to gather around and get some insight into their season ahead. We are just looking for some insights and a path forward or a way to navigate this Scorpio season and this Scorpio new moon. What messages do these transits hold for us? And how are we meant to relate and survive this area of our lives? Wow, I think I just got some answers for my own self. Ciao. I ain't even pulled no cards yet. I just dropped one though. Hold on. Been waiting to book, but I just moved. But birthday money. Okay, period. Congratulations on your move. Ooh, ciao. I just feel like I already know where this is going for me. Hey, Sloan. Happy Sunday. All right. Please give us the medicine. All right. Let me pull these cards up. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't already. Ooh, interesting. How many cards do I want? I'll go ahead and do a 3 card. Oh, shit. So many majors. So many majors in this spread. Before I hop in, the deck that I'm using is the Black Tarot. This is the Black Tarot by Nisha Williams and Kamisha Naidu, I think is how you say it. It's a beautiful deck. It's an ancestral awakening deck and guidebook. I love it. I love it here. Okay. So, our cards for this new moon are starting with the star on the bottom of the deck. I don't think I pulled the star in this deck before, but look at that. The star. Trying to get the camera to focus. Come on. Come on, baby. The star, our card on the bottom. So that is our underlying theme or context. I like that. That's interesting. And then our first card in the spread, 9 of coins or 9 of pentacles. Also a positive card. This is our situation at hand. 9 of coins. Our card in the middle for the obstacle or the thing to overcome or the challenge is the High Priestess. Motherfuckers this time of year love to talk about the veil is thin. Well, child, it's a veil. Obviously, it's going to be thin. High Priestess, Major Arcana as our thing to overcome. And last but not least, Temperance. Once again, we've gotten Temperance several times. I feel like every time I pulled cards the last couple of months, we've gotten Temperance, and it's been in this position, in the solutions path forward position. Temperance. So, okay, well, we got to talk through these. This is our message for the new moon I'm going to put this in the chat. Nine of Pentacles, the High Priestess, and Temperance. Bloop. Okay. Let me think. So our context, our underlying energy, the thing that we're talking about without talking about, is the star. The star, from what I can remember, is about imagination, but it's also about, like, after a bunch of changes have happened in your life, you've kind of had your tower moment where, the tower represents, kind of like we were talking about earlier, your tower represents this like fortress of ideals and mindsets or projections or whatever it is that you've been holding on to that just has to come down at some point. It feels very vulnerable for the tower to crash down because you've released all of these fallen out of your fortress of sorts, your fortress of illusions, or your fortress of um the tower kind of reminds me of I guess I'm telling on myself today. Tower kind of reminds me of relinquishing control. And so then the star is basically what's left once you've relinquished control. Sometimes it's what's on the other side of letting go of all of those things, the ways that you have organized your life around, whether it's avoidance or denial or whatever it is. So if the idea is that you're trying to keep your shadow contained, if we're staying on the topic, and you've let your shadow out, the star kind of implies that this is what's possible for you when your tower of control or ignorance or denial or whatever it is crumbles. So there's a change that happens that you can't do anything about, and then on the other side of it there's freedom, basically. So I tend to see the star as freedom, and then once you're free from those compulsions, from those neuroses, from the self-containment of it all, once you're free, you have space to imagine something new for yourself. You have space to create new worlds that aren't bound by those same patterns and limits that were keeping you constrained without your knowledge before the tower card. Because if I'm not mistaken, the tower happens right before the star. So I'm also going to read from the book and just see what the author has to say about the star card as well. But I actually quite like how I described it just then. Yeah, the tower comes before the star. So the star, it's about hope, blessings, and it's a yes card. So when you look at this card, bloop, it says a couple are freed of their shackles, joyously following the light from the North Star. The two are ready for the calm of freedom after the storm and the devastation of enslavement. They celebrate clarity after years of disillusionment. They have hope, knowing that everything they need is within them. Their gifts, abundance, and wisdom are all the sweeter for the struggles and the challenges that they endured. The star speaks to creativity and inspiration, asking how we can spread hope. The couple will need healing after overcoming a struggle, which is the tower energy. Take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. So yeah, um, they referenced slavery in this, and it made me think of how, so there's this idea in psychology called learned helplessness. And I know we've referred to learned helplessness during a lot of like Capricorn transits, and especially Saturn and Capricorn, which feels similar to what I was talking about with the tower, where sometimes you can get stuck in this learned helplessness, which is basically like, the study they did was on, I think it was like dogs or some kind of animal trapped in a cage, and there was an electric shock every time that they were in this cage, that every time they tried to escape, I think I could be misquoting the study, but the idea still remains the same. Like, there's this belief that every time they try to escape, there's this electric shock, every time they try to walk out of the door or whatever. And then at some point, the door is opened and the animals still won't leave because they know that every time they've tried to leave previously, there was an electric shock. So even though the door is wide open to this cage and the animals are no longer caged in it, they find themselves staying in it because they just believe that there's no point in trying to escape anymore. The pain of trying to escape is greater than just staying in the situation that they're in. So they stop trying to escape. Whenever we're talking about like slavery, there's this misconception about like, well, some people decided to stay enslaved because they felt like, at least their schedules and their life was more predictable while they were in that enslavement situation versus the unknown of freedom, basically, of being able to go forth. And even though you're starting with virtually nothing, you're free now. And I think that's a great kind of assessment of where we're at dealing with capitalism today as well, and dealing with fascism. There's just so much of this learned helplessness around it that we feel like nothing that we do is going to change our circumstances, so we just don't even try. I think the star is a challenge that says, like, if you could do anything, what would you do? Like, imagine that you are free, or maybe you are free and you just aren't aware of the ways that you are, that you have this opportunity to like reinvent something. And in this case, I would imagine it's around reinventing yourself, since we're talking about fixed signs. So the star is kind of this question of like, well, what do you do whenever you're not bound by the things that you were once bound by? Like, what's available to you now that maybe you couldn't consider before? Like, what are the possibilities that you just haven't considered because in your mind you're still bound by these rules or these norms or whatever it is that were keeping you so constricted or constrained before? And I see y'all are speaking in the chat. Rune says, I'm in a reading group and we're talking about internalized fascisms and how contending with that ugliness in the mirror is necessary to be able to move forward in solidarity and safety, specifically in terms of not replicating the violence of the state and authoritarianism in our pursuit of liberation. 1000% no notes. The star feels like a very Aquarius card to me. Aquarius in that sense of it both being a fixed sign, which is related to our conversation, and also where the North Node is right now astrologically. But the star, when we're talking about liberation, is very much that. How do we imagine a future that doesn't replicate what we've already experienced in the past? And when we're talking about fixed signs and this idea of self-acceptance, it's how can I allow myself to be someone that I haven't allowed myself to be previously because of these certain constraints or, again, social norms or expectations of the person I'm supposed to be. So love to see the star card. It's a very fortuitous card. It's a very what's the word? It's a very auspicious card. So good news. This Scorpio is here to liberate us, is what it's giving. 9 of Cords in the situation. So the situation at hand, the actual conflict of sorts, maybe that we're dealing with, or just kind of where we're at the moment, at this moment in time, is 9 of Pentacles. Again, another positive and auspicious card. 9 of Pentacles is like, we're talking about Pentacles, which has to do with earth, has to do with materials, it has to do with tools and access to things. And the 9 of Coins says something about satisfaction with your material circumstances, which I think is interesting to see in a situation where we are in a recession that nobody is explicitly calling a recession. People are losing access to their healthcare, or healthcare premiums are going up. Food has gotten expensive and limited. People are, again, unemployment crisis is either looming or already happening and they're not talking about it. So there is a lot where our material life right now is insecure, but this 9 of Pentacles is saying something around like maybe we're seeking that satisfaction and security, or the situation we're dealing with just in general is around, I would say, a material sense of security and satisfaction. Maybe that doesn't necessarily mean money, but maybe it does, depending on the person. But maybe it also is just about like, maybe I see 9 of Coins as Taurus being the opposite sign from Scorpio. And Taurus is a sign that deals with material satisfaction and pleasure and sensuality and the self-approval and self-acceptance that is becomes available to you whenever you've accepted that sometimes rejection is protection, right? I think about rejection as protection a lot when it comes to fixed signs and especially the Scorpio and Taurus axis, because everybody is not for you and you are not for everybody. So, yeah, I wonder how much, if we're talking about this idea of what freedom looks like once we've allowed ourselves to reckon with our shadow, that the ideal outcome from that to some extent is this sense of security and satisfaction. Maybe we're struggling to feel that sense of security and satisfaction um, at this moment because of reasons that I'm sure the rest of the spread will explain. So, 9 of coins. Let me see what the book says. Oop. 9 of coins. Hello? Okay. 9 of pentacles. So, the traits are self-sufficient and luxury. Interesting. A couple stands at the entrance of their home, welcoming guests with honey jars and figs. They have built their empire and are comfortably self-sufficient. This couple has broken free of the constructs created to limit them and now have a flourishing hive made on their terms. The two honor each other as equals and take pride in the home they have made. They are filled with gratitude for their lifestyle, circumstances, and company. The 9 of coins rings of abundance. The couple appreciates moving at a slower pace, taking care of the environment, and acknowledging their success. They take time to thank those who came before them, who paved the way. What is your manifesto? Continue to structure your life in a way that works for you in balance and sustainability. Feel confident in your ability to handle anything that comes your way. Trust your voice and don't be afraid to create a path where few have wandered. Oh, that last line fits in so well with the star and just in what Mars does and what Scorpio does and Aries as well, but just Mars, how Mars functions in the zodiac. It does exactly that. It will take you down the road less traveled. And a lot of times, someone else is not going to lead you down the road less traveled. You just have to venture that direction. And people may follow you, people may not, but the people who do follow you, or at the very least the people who do support you along the way down that road less traveled, those are the people who see you and who accept you and who are willing to let it all play out and see where it goes. Hey Jada, I was just watching your little check-in earlier and I think it was very well timed, as it always is. Good to see you, boo. So yeah, I love that. Being able to trust your voice and don't be afraid to create a path where few has wandered. And especially the line again, this theme coming up of a couple that is broken free of the constructs created to limit them and now have a flourishing hive made on their terms. I think this card is saying what's possible when you embrace the star, right? When you escape from that tower and everything comes crumbling down and you've ventured into um you've ventured into this unfamiliar territory and now you're like, okay, it's time to rebuild. What do we build? And that's where it makes so much sense to see the high priestess here in the challenge, the obstacle, the thing to overcome section of this spread. Because what is the high priestess? Intuition. Hello. It's trusting your gut. And I think intuition, like, I think intuition when it comes to discernment and just intuition in general, like, so much of intuition is to me about your lived experience and pattern recognition and also your connection to something bigger than you, right? That could be something spiritual or it could just be your belief systems, your politics, your morals, your values, whatever it is, but there's a connection to something larger than you that when you feel anchored and rooted in that connection to something larger than you, kind of becomes your North Star. And I think it's interesting then to see the star right above the high priestess in the spread, because you have a direction that you need to head in that, when we're talking about Scorpio fixed signs, is authentic and that is true to you. And so intuition really is about coming home to yourself. It's about listening to the voice inside that, sometimes it may be scared, it may be uncertain, but its job is to expand who you are and how you think and what you believe. Its job is to expand your vision beyond the tunnel vision of the tower, for example, like we were talking about, or the tunnel vision of societal limits and constraints and expectations, or the tunnel vision of your family's expectations or cultural expectations, or whatever it is. Your intuition pops in to say, hey, what about this? And my partner actually asked me this the other day, but this is a question that I often ask a lot and that others ask a lot, and I find people asking this question a lot when planets are in Scorpio, and it's, what is the difference between my anxiety and my intuition? Over the years, when I've been asked this, or when I've seen other people answer this question, the answer has fluctuated, or has changed and evolved over time. Um, my partner, my lover, okay, don't get too excited, but my lover, um, asked this question. But yeah, there's this question of like, what is the difference between my anxiety and my intuition? And some people will say that like anxiety, like, okay, if we're talking about shadow stuff, right? Anxiety could be one of those shadows, maybe. If the point is not to get rid of the shadow and to give it a job instead, anxiety would be one of those things, one of those uncomfortable feelings or disruptive feelings or whatever, just emotions that is trying to do a job for you. It just doesn't know what job it needs to do. Um, Anxiety, as it evolved, exists to keep you out of danger. It exists to help you anticipate when you might be putting yourself in harm's way. We need that. We don't need to get rid of anxiety. um Anxiety also exists to help you to consider multiple possibilities and multiple outcomes. Have y'all seen Inside Out 2? It's been a while since I've seen it, so I can't fully remember all the details of it, but I don't want to spoil the ending. But that's a good movie to watch if you want to know about this whole conversation about like anxiety. Yes, it can ruin your life and keep you trapped in that tower and give you a very narrow lens on the world and of yourself, but ultimately like it serves a function. You just need to decide what function you want anxiety to serve for you. Yes, Deb says anxiety is an alarm, but sometimes it has its wires crossed by history. Absolutely. So I think whenever we talk about Scorpio and anxiety, like sometimes anxiety, like I'll use myself as an example because anxiety is one of my loudest emotions. It tends to overshadow everything else. A lot of anxiety for me was feeling like I need to speak up for how I really feel about something, especially when it comes to how someone else is treating me. But I am afraid to do so because if I do that, I risk rejection, I risk punishment, or I risk sometimes violence or harm. And so instead of saying what I need to say, I shrink, I make myself smaller, I just hold my tongue. And all of that stuff that needs to come out instead gets internalized and now it sits in my gut and it constricts. Um a lot of anxiety has also been fear around being myself or fear around being perceived as myself. I asked a question the other day, I think potentially under the Leo moon, that was like, what do I do when I want to be seen and I want to be myself, but I don't want to be seen being myself? Mind you, I have Mars and Leo connected to my Scorpio placements. A lot of the fear of being seen as myself is being seen as a Black trans man in in any small town in Texas. The holidays is when this comes up a lot for me. It's anticipating this rejection, it's anticipating shame, it's anticipating alienation from my family members who grew up in smaller towns. My cousins yesterday were asking, where has the family said that we're having Christmas? And someone mentioned that they might be trying to host it in my hometown. And my immediate feeling was anxiety because one thing I'm not about to do is be caught up being a Black trans man in Amarillo, Texas. after I lived there as a woman for 26 years. Like, probably not. Probably, well, I said 26, 23 years. Probably not. So that's a place where anxiety makes sense. It makes sense for me to be anxious about that. It makes sense for me to want to avoid that situation. Um, and another way that anxiety has shown up and maybe not served me is whenever it came time for me to actually start taking testosterone into transition. There's a lot of anxiety that I held around, what if I do this and then people don't love me anymore? What if I do this and my whole family rejects me? What if I do this and I'm ugly? What if I do this and, what, and my partner at the time breaks up with me? Like, there are so many, again, valid fears, but my intuition around transitioning, it didn't feel constricted. It didn't feel constrained. It didn't feel like a narrow vision like my anxiety did. It felt expansive. It felt like, wow, what's possible for me if I transition? Instead of what's going to happen, what should I be afraid of if I transition? My intuition was like, no, 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 no. What becomes possible? Like, yes, we are absolutely risking all of these things if we go in this direction. But I just really need you to hear me. My intuition speaking to me. I really need you to hear me that there actually might be so much more available to you if you lean into this, if you go towards this thing. It felt soft, it felt encouraging, it felt warm, it felt, again, expansive is really the word that comes to me, because anxiety does feel so tunnel vision. Anxiety does feel like the tower, but intuition feels like the star, and it feels like high priestess, and it feels like openness, even with awareness of the potential consequences. It's like the possibilities outweigh the benefits, the potential beneficial possibilities, and the opportunity, especially the opportunity for growth. I think this is where it's a very thin line between intuition and anxiety, because growth itself is something that feels uncomfortable, and it can feel anxiety inducing, and it can feel expansive all at once, because it is scary to grow. Growth is the uncertainty, right? Like, I don't know who I'm going to be if I actually do grow. I don't know who I'm going to become if I grow. That's worthy of a little bit of anxiety. But again, growth, I think the difference between growth and staying in a pattern is that growth also feels expansive. It's like, I know if I do this thing, that feels really scary to me, but it also feels kind of exciting. Sometimes anxiety feels like excitement too. So I'm preaching, but my point is, intuition, even whenever it's leading you in a direction that brings up other feelings like anxiety and grief and loss and whatever else, that there's so much opportunity that kind of says, yes, you may lose these things, or you are risking things, but the things that could potentially replace, or the thing, and even if it doesn't replace, the things that you will gain from going in this direction will help you deal with the things that you lose. It will help you deal with the grief. It will help you grow in a way that the risk is worth it. I think that's intuition. It's very difficult to know exactly what that sounds like, but I think if there's ever a part of you that says, like, that kind of says, yes, I'm afraid, and what does this open up for me? That's when we're in the energy of the star. Because the minute that you become curious, right? Jupiter's going to move back into Gemini, y'all. The minute that you become curious about other possibilities, and you feel a little bit less rigid about a particular outcome, like sometimes when we're talking about giving your anxiety a job, it means, okay, anxiety, like acknowledging it first off. Okay, anxiety, I hear you. You are trying to protect me from this, this, and this. And those are all very scary things for me as I exist right now, and with the tools and the knowledge that I have right now. I would like your permission, anxiety, and maybe this is how you say it, I don't know. Or you just give yourself the permission to say, I acknowledge that these things are real and true for me and very important, and I'm not abandoning these things. But I would also like to know what else could possibly happen that maybe isn't so bad. And I think that's where your intuition gets a little space to come up and say, ah, yes, now we can imagine something different. And through imagining something different, when you give yourself permission to look in that more expansive view, that's where other aspects of yourself are then allowed to come forward and to explore and to remind you of these other skills, strengths, characteristics that you have that would help you see the mission through and go down that uncharted path or into the uncertainty. But until you allow yourself space to expand in that way, those other aspects of yourself can't really come forward because the anxiety is going to be like, ah, but am I safe? Is it safe? Is it safe to be me? Am I safe? Is this safe? You are the only person who can decide whether you feel safe or not. And it's not necessarily that safety is a choice, because there are things that can happen outside of your control that are absolutely not safe. And again, that's why anxiety exists. But you can also decide, in the same way that you can decide to trust someone, and you can decide whether or not you want to trust someone based on what you know about them and the patterns and the experiences and all that other stuff. In the same way that well, that's really what we're talking about, right? The decision to trust yourself. Safety safety is not always about being on the defense. And I think that's something that's really hard for Scorpio to recognize. Is that safety is not always defensiveness. Sometimes safety is self-trust. This is probably a message for myself because I have Jupiter and Scorpio, but the choice to feel safe is less about trusting things outside of you and more about trusting yourself to get through it. That's really what I'm getting at. And so the anxiety sometimes in some contexts is a form of self-abandonment. I know it definitely has been for me, because it's me automatically deciding that I can't handle what's on the other side of uncertainty. But if I make the choice to say, you know what? I've survived so many things in my life up to this point. Maybe I can survive this too. So if I allow myself to believe that I can survive this too, then what becomes possible for me? Final card in the deck, Temperance. And the spread, Temperance. Temperance then to me feels like exactly what I'm talking about in this debate between anxiety and intuition. Because Temperance is trying to balance the two. It's, again, giving anxiety its rightful place to say, all right, you're trying to make me aware of what could go wrong. Cool. Thank you for that. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to make note of that. Now I'm going to allow this other part of myself to come forward and say, okay, now what could go right? And if the benefits outweigh the negatives and your intuition says, I think we can handle this, you go in that direction. Trust yourself, and that whatever happens, you're going to have ups and downs along the way of whatever it is. There are going to be moments where it goes exactly the way that you wanted, and there are going to be those moments that challenge you. There are going to be those moments that frustrate you, those moments that hurt, those moments where you lose people along the way, where people reject you along the way, or moments where you are going to have to try and do something or be someone that you haven't been before. But again, if we're talking about authenticity and self-acceptance and not abandoning yourself in that process, it's like, I lost my train of thought a little bit. Sorry, I'm gonna come back to it. I was talking about temperance. I was talking about balancing, venturing into the unknown, the self-abandonment. There was something about the self-abandonment of like when things start to not go your way. It doesn't, yes, okay. When you are in the newness and the uncertainty of it all, and you've listened to your intuition and things start to kind of not go your way. The idea in those moments is to recognize that those moments where things aren't going your way, or they just aren't smooth and obvious and they don't feel great, those are the moments that are for you to grow through, right? Because you didn't embark on this journey to be comfortable. You didn't embark on this journey to feel safe, actually. You didn't embark on this journey for things to be predictable and easy. You went on this in this direction to grow because there was something that you weren't getting from your current circumstances. There was something you weren't getting. There was something you weren't getting, something wasn't going, something wasn't satisfying enough about where you were at. And that's why you chose to go down this road less traveled. Something about the way things already were wasn't satisfying to you. Not enough. You wanted more. You dared to want more. And because you dared to want more, in spite of everything telling you to settle and stay in that tower, you decided the journey was worth it. So trust your decision to grow. Trust your decision to grow and continue to be yourself. I think. But trust your decision to grow and see where it takes you. Maybe it doesn't immediately go the way that you're envisioning, and that's okay. You haven't arrived wherever you were meant to arrive in this particular journey just yet. You got to keep seeing it through. You got to stay with it. You got to continue to press on and just let it play out. I think this is what retrogrades teach us. Retrogrades of all the planets. They teach us that, like, yeah, you really did think things were going to continue along this path, but for whatever reason, when you go back to again that higher North Star thing that feels true and real and authentic to you is calling you, and you decide to listen to it, you're not going to stay in one place for very long. You're going to pursue it. So you just got to be willing to stay the course. So temperance is the alchemy of, I think in this case, different parts of yourself coming together, different feelings coming together. They don't have to negate or push each other out. Expectations. It's the amalgamation of all of these different things and it not needing to be black or white. I think that's some of the power that Saturn and Pisces. Sorry, everything glitched. Make sure y'all can still hear me. All of this water, I think temperance with the high priestess here and the star and everything else is just trying to say, like, yeah, you're feeling all of these different feelings. It doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice. It just means you're feeling a bunch of different feelings. And again, when we talk about regulation, how your body naturally knows how to regulate, even though sometimes we need to intervene and do it ourselves. Like, I trust myself. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to drive that point home as well, because we are still dealing with cardinal signs. We are still dealing with Jupiter in Cancer throughout the rest of this Scorpio season. Just because it doesn't feel good doesn't mean you were wrong. Just because it doesn't feel good, just because you are feeling a bunch of feelings and you feel them strongly, doesn't mean that you're wrong. Doesn't mean that you're right either. It's probably more than one thing at once. And the cardinal of it all, remember, is that sometimes we do or don't do things because we don't want to feel a certain way. But what happens when we allow ourselves to feel a certain way, even in ways that contradict each other? What happens when we allow ourselves to feel things that seemingly don't go together, and are trying to tell us something about our current circumstances, but there's not just one answer? Like, there's so much possibility that becomes available to you, but you have to be willing, again, to ride the wave of your emotions, but you also have to be willing to explore internally and externally. And to know that, yeah, it's not going to be easy, because again, the point is not for it to be easy. The point is to grow. So I sound like a broken record. I want to see what the book says about temperance here as our solution. Man, I didn't know I was going to say none of this today. I love spirituality. Temperance. Traits are contentment, balance. It's also a yes card. So this is a very optimistic card, you guys. This card, this spread is giving go for it. All right. It says a woman in a kitchen tempers chocolate, heating and cooling the chocolate to stabilize it, creating a glossy finish. She works to create balance and finding the perfect equilibrium. Tempering takes patience, understanding the gravity of a stable personal foundation, and collaboration with the community. Temperance calls for moderation. Do not act in haste, as the material and spiritual aspects of a situation must be considered in equal measure. When the temperance card is pulled, it's time to consider the following. What do you bring to the table? Do you actively engage with viewpoints outside of your echo chambers? Have you considered compromising? Listen, that's it. It ain't nothing else to say that I ain't already said. The cards are very clear. You are the thing that you take with you on that journey. You just got to do what you gonna do. And it's gonna play out how it plays out. And you are driving that bus. You are driving the boat. You are the pilot. So it makes me circle back to the whole learned helplessness thing. Like, yes, there are things outside of you that you cannot control. That's not for you to worry about. I didn't like hearing that. I didn't like hearing that just now. I didn't like saying it. But it's true. Those things are not your concern. Your concern is what are you going to do about it? And sometimes you don't know what you're going to do about it until it happens. You just got to let yourself do what you're going to do and feel how you're going to feel. And what I also like about the fact that I did read the book is that there was the reminder that you don't have to do it alone either. Scorpio. Reading myself. You don't have to do it alone. Sometimes you do need, like, okay, so case in point, if you do find yourself having that really narrow anxiety and tunnel vision about all of it, and you can't get yourself out of it to hear your own intuition, ask somebody else for their opinion, for their insight, for their judgment. But you got to be specific in your ask now so that people don't just project and impose their fears and anxieties onto you, but say, like, yeah, I'm considering making this decision, or I'm in this situation and all I can see is this. What else is there? What am I missing? What are some other possibilities that maybe you see that I don't see? And it doesn't always have to be positive. I would actually like to give more credit to the anxiety, because sometimes your intuition is saying, like, maybe we don't do this. Maybe this is not for you. And you have to be able to trust that as well. And sometimes you need somebody else to also step in and say, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's going to give you what you want. But again, you have to remember what your intention is in the first place, what your goal is, or the outcome that you want. Again, letting yourself imagine a possibility beyond what already exists. You got to be really clear on what that is in order for your intuition to even be able to step forward in those moments and say, okay, this is the direction we need to go. And then temperance along the way says, yeah, sometimes we're going to feel like this, and sometimes we're going to feel like this, and sometimes it's going to be like this. And it's going to be what it's going to be, but we are going to find a way to get through it. We are going to do little bits at a time. We're going to ask for help when we need it. We're going to go fast when we need to go fast, and we're going to go slow when we need to go slow. We're going to show up when we need to show up, and we're going to sit down and rest when we need to sit down and rest. Like, we are going to moderate. We're going to take care of ourselves along the way. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think the point of this spread is kind of saying, do not be afraid. I watched Interstellar recently, and they say that whole poem of do not be afraid to go into that dark night or whatever. Be not afraid to go into that dark night. Like, that's kind of what it's giving. And the dark night may be something material, and it may be something internal. But when you become clear on whatever that is for you, move towards it. And if you must, Baby steps, or one step at a time. And allow yourself to be flexible in that pursuit. No notes. Let me see what y'all are saying in the chat. Do not go gentle. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Do not go gentle into that dark night. That's even better. Okay. Sloan says, trust your voice. Had finally stood up for myself this week in a conflict when I really struggled with people pleasing. Super uncomfortable, but I had to lean into my own knowing. Love it. Round of applause for you. Because that shit is not easy. And when I did finally stand up for myself, I really did feel freed. Brilliant. Excellent. One of the things I said in response to being asked about SI when I started transitioning was, I want to be here. Oh, yes. Same. I want to be here. And if I want to be here, I need to face myself and give myself the chance to be me. I had exactly the same thought. Exactly the same thought. I was like, okay, well, I already know what it's like to suffer. That goes back to the learned helplessness thing again. It's like, okay, well, I already know what it's like to suffer. And I could decide to keep just suffering. I could stay. It's in a way, it's kind of playing small. It's like, well, it's the devil you know kind of thing. But then there's like, okay, well, if I'm already suffering, then what's the worst that could happen? I might as well be myself. Like if I'm going to suffer, I might as well be myself while I do it. And I think what we underestimate is that whenever we're being authentic, even in situations that we don't like, it's because we're being authentic that we're allowed to create more for ourselves. Whereas when you're being inauthentic, you're just kind of stuck. You're stuck in this really restrictive pattern that just doesn't allow for very much movement in general. That's why Mars is about that authenticity and about that autonomy to be yourself. It just like sometimes you just gotta bust up. You gotta bust up out that bitch, or that something needs to be destroyed, or something needs to be disrupted. And sometimes the thing that needs to be disrupted is you. Sometimes the thing that needs to undergo the death and transformation is you, right? Redefining holidays has been important. Like my stepdaughter is native on her mom's side and we don't celebrate pilgrims. Okay, period. If ever there was a time to tune into the nuance of what your body feels like when different emotions come up, it's now. It's the only map that is updating and right for you. Yes. Man, I saw a post the other day too, I think on my personal Instagram, that said something about how the present is never somewhere that we can stay. It's just a place that we keep returning back to. I thought that was really interesting. Even though the concept of somatics has been sucked into a weird space with emotional regulation. Yeah. Yeah, it has. See my rant about that from last week. And I do want to just reiterate as well, because I know I was kind of playing not devil's advocate, but I was arguing for the other side of regulation, not necessarily meaning being in control all the time, but like the point is to know that like you can't always control your feelings in the sense that repressing your feelings is not the point. But again, temperance, moderating your feelings or working with your feelings or using your feelings as fuel for action is different to me than repressing and controlling them in a way that feels like, again, inauthentic and just like restrained. Like you can do something with your feelings, but your feelings don't also need to spill out all over everywhere and all over everyone else all the time either. Like that's not the point. It's just to at least allow enough of it to come up that you, again, feel some clarity on what the next thing is that you need to do. Because that's what cardinal signs are for, to do something. Deeply wanting to be here and wanting to face yourself as part of transition. 1000%. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to staying alive. That's what a lot of people don't realize about transition. Like a commitment to staying alive and a commitment to being yourself, which is a huge commitment. One thing I've realized is how important it is for me to try creating a safe space for neurodivergent people, since I do a lot of late identification and it's meant coming to terms with my own neurodivergence, for sure. For sure, for sure, for sure. This hits home, especially for me as an aerialist who wants to grow and the obstacle is feeling unsafe. My anxiety limits my growth a lot. It's been a journey of developing self-trust, for sure. For sure. And sometimes that also something I have to remind myself a lot is learning how to fall helps create the confidence to take risks. You have to practice falling, which is practice falling in a safe way, so that when that moments come that you actually do fall because something out of your control happens, then you at least can protect yourself along the descent in a way. And I say the same thing about learning how to fight. That's something that came up in one of my readings this past week was we're talking about like passive aggression and fear of conflict and confrontation and stuff like that. It's often because we don't know how to fight. And that's where I was talking earlier about how protecting yourself in safety doesn't always look like defense, doesn't always look like defensiveness. It also doesn't always look like attacking, but there's a way to fight or a way to argue or a way to approach conflict. And if we just don't know what that is, then of course we're going to avoid it. But once you have the tools, then you know how to lean into that discomfort. But those are the things that like we have to seek those things out. We can practice through trial and error, but a lot of times the consequences of just trial and error with no guidance or no insight, sometimes the consequences are a little bit more detrimental than what we would like. And I do think there's a place for that as well. Like sometimes in my very Saturn way, sometimes things just don't go our way because of our own ignorance, and sometimes we can't change the outcome of that. And there's a lot of grief around that, but there's always the opportunity to begin again. So when you're in the beginning again, in the beginning, it's an inside joke. But when you're in that opportunity to begin again, that's when you're like, okay, before I just do some ignorant shit, let me go seek out some of that insight we were talking about, or let me go seek out some help from a professional or an expert or someone who knows how to do this thing that I don't know how to do. And we're back at the temperance card again. So yeah. We also talk a lot about the ethics of disagreement and hospitality in the reading group. That's another good one. I think the content and quality of anxiety has changed around the ongoing pandemic. 1000%. That whole thing of like, it's hard to reconcile with trauma when the trauma is ongoing. Yeah, we did lose a lot of people. Alice Wong and then also Leslie. I don't know Leslie's last name, but Leslie also passed this week. It's really fucked up. Getting curious about feelings and viewing them as neutral rather than placing judgment before you can even learn what they're trying to tell you. No notes. 10 out of 10. Exactly that. Yes, Leslie Lee. Thank you, Runes. Exactly this. And I think that plays into the whole shadow thing we were talking about with Scorpio. It's like rather than immediately judging an emotion as bad or wrong or shameful, just like ask it questions. Sit that feeling down and interview it. Like, hey, what's going on? What's this about? What are we doing here? I didn't know we were going to be in church this morning, but go off. Me neither. I saw one post and I was like, all right, well, I know this post exists, and then I'm going to pull some cards because new moon, and then the sun just got here. I don't know what's going on, child. But now that we've had this, there are some things I was uncertain about that I feel I don't feel certain necessarily, but I feel a lot more open. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I already felt a little bit of openness. Scorpio is my 6th house, and 6th house deals with work and co-workers. And with astro, especially the longer that you do it, at some point the writing is kind of on the wall about certain things, and then the time comes and the things are thinking, and you're like, well, here it is. How am I going to respond to it? So we will see what's going to happen, and I will let y'all know once I know what's going to happen. But I will not be speaking on it before it happens. Okay. Woo! So many things. Okay, I have to go. I have to go. But I hope that this landed for you. I hope you got something from this. I see that a lot of you did. So thank you for your participation and your feedback in the chat. It really helps me feel good about what I'm doing and saying, and helps me to continue forward. And even if y'all weren't participating, I would still have to trust myself. So thank you for your participation, for your viewership, for your community. I fuck with y'all the long way. Yeah. I will see y'all in 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, I don't think I'm off yet. But so I'll see y'all next week. I probably won't do the week after that because that'll be the Thanksgiving weekend. So I'm gonna give myself a break. But I will see y'all next Sunday. We're gonna talk about whatever we talk about. And I would love to hear either next week or at some point how all of this shows up for you over the next month, over this lunar cycle. Very, very curious. And I will be sharing along the way as well. Y'all have a wonderful day. I'm trying to come up with some ideas for my Patreon. So if you have an idea, let me know. I'm thinking about maybe recording mini videos since I just can't bring myself to write. Or something like that. And maybe they'll be a little bit more personal. I don't know. We'll see. But I am in exploration around what to do with my Patreon. So if you have suggestions, please give them to me. Other than that, I hope you'll have a wonderful week. Again, please like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Drop a comment if you're watching this sometime in the future. Future me says thank you. Past me says thank you right now. And I love y'all so much. Take care. Bye-bye.